Hi and welcome back to the channel, everybody. When I last posted a video, President Joe Biden was the presumptive nominee of the Democratic Party, but since then we've had an obvious shift. It is Vice President Kamala Harris and her running mate Tim Walz, the official nominees on the Democratic ticket, while on the Republican side it is former President Donald Trump and his running mate J.D. Vance. Now in this video, I want to talk about the 2024 Battleground states, but I want to talk about them in relation to the national trends, the national popular voting margins from both 2016 and 2020, and kind of contextualize where those states stand in relation to the popular vote. Because as you know, in America, we don't elect the president, I should say, according to the popular vote. We elect them according to the Electoral College, which gives a lot more power to the individual states. So, we can take those popular voting margins, see where the country is voting as a whole, where the country has voted and where the country is trending, and relate those to the trends within those individual states, particularly those 7 battleground states that are going to be so important in this 2024 election. Let's start by reminding ourselves what these key battlegrounds are, these 7 states: Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Now, these are the states that we're going to be watching on November 5th. We're going to be watching them maybe for a couple days beyond that. But just how important are these states? Well, they could go either way in this 2024 election. And just to further that point, all of these states, with the exception of Nevada, voted for Donald Trump back in 2016, while all of these states, with the lone exception of North Carolina, voted for Joe Biden back in 2020. Now, aside from these 7 states, bar a landslide that we just aren't seeing at the moment in one campaign's direction or the other, all other states should vote according to how we think they're going to vote. So that really leaves these 7 states as the lone toss-ups that will swing in one direction or another. And they'll swing in one direction or another based on a variety of factors, right? Trends, demographics, polls. That's how we'll determine how these states are going to shift come election day. But today, I just want to talk about them in relation to the national trends. I want to stay away from the polls, especially given that we're so close from, or we're so closely removed, I should say, from that presidential debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump on September 10th. We haven't really gotten a chance to see how the polls are going to shift based on that debate. So I think it would be a little bit unfair right now to go and analyze polling data without knowing those shifts. But, and I'll say this again toward the end of the video, when we do move toward these projections and toward the general election projections, I want to take a look at the variety of factors that are going to play. And that's going to include the national trends and the margins, of course, but they'll also include polling data, what we know from polls, and just what we know from just the shifts within the states in general. But with that being said, let's take a look at the popular voting margins, starting with 2016. In 2016, Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by 48.2% to Donald Trump's 46.1%, a national margin of D plus 2.1. So she won by 2.1 percentage points. And again, I just want to further the point that the popular vote, in all likelihood, come this 2024 election, is going to favor the Democrats, while the Electoral College has an inherent pro-Republican bias in that manner. And that is to say that here Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by about 2 percentage points, but still lost the Electoral College fairly comfortably to Donald Trump. And now taking a look at the 2020 election, Joe Biden won that popular vote by 51.4 percentage points to Trump's 46.9, a national margin of D plus 4.5. Now, even with this 4.5 margin of victory, it was still a popular vote victory that was just edged out by Biden. However, he ends up with a fairly comfortable electoral college victory back in that 2020 election. So again, we see a national shift from 2016 to 2020 of about 2.4 percentage points in favor of the Democrats. So Joe Biden was able to shift the nation by about 2.5 percentage points in the left's favor. So let's get into the states. The 7 battlegrounds. We'll start with Georgia. Georgia's polls close at 7, so we're going to go in order of poll closings. And we're going to take a look at how Georgia has compared to the national popular vote. So for all these states, you're going to see a similar graphic here on your screen. So the nation voted for Hillary Clinton by 2.1 percentage points. It voted for Trump in Georgia, Georgia voted for Trump by 5.1 percentage points. So Trump won the state of Georgia by about 5 percentage points. That shows that Georgia voted 7.2% to the right of the national popular vote. While in 2020, we see that Georgia voted about 4 percentage points to the right of the national popular vote. So at the bottom of your screen, you can just contextualize that with the fact that the nation has shifted 2.4 percentage points towards Democrats between 2016 and 2020, whereas Georgia has shifted further to the left than the nation, about 3 percentage points to the left. Now, what does that mean? Well, for one thing, it means Georgia is shifting to the left. Now, we have to contextualize that with some disclaimers. Will Georgia continue to shift to the left? Will 2020 prove an outlier and we'll see a shift back toward the right? This is going to be the case with all of these 7 battleground states, but all we're taking a look at here are the trends. And the trends show that Georgia is shifting to the left even further than the nation. That being said, it's also pro-Republican in terms of the nation on a general election day. So, Joe Biden, for example, won the national popular vote by 4.5 percentage points, but he only won the state by a narrow 0.3 percentage points. That said, with the nation shifting toward the left, with the state shifting toward the left by about 3 points, it goes to say that if we were just looking at trends, Kamala Harris would need to be looking somewhere in a plus 2.5, plus 3, maybe plus 3.5 national popular vote victory in order to win the state of Georgia, though it is definitely one of the more friendly, just according to trends, among the more friendly states for the Democrats and Kamala Harris. Donald Trump would like to keep that popular vote as close to 2016 margins as possible in order to claim the state of Georgia. Let's take a look at the state of North Carolina. Polls close at 7:30. Donald Trump overperformed the nation, or I should say the state, voted to the right of the nation by about 6 percentage points back in 2016 and 2020, both fairly identical margins. It's also shifted toward the right by about 0.1 percentage points. This just shows that in North Carolina, though trends have gone the left's way in a lot of other manners, and I'm talking here polls, I'm talking demographic shifts, the national shift, when we're just talking about how the state behaves according to the nation, not many positives you can take there from the left's perspective, except for the fact that North Carolina didn't shift that much further to the right in 2020. However, a 6 percentage point bias towards the Republicans is a fairly large number. So in order for Kamala Harris to claim this state, she's going to need to perform close, if not beyond, what Joe Biden did in 2020, and that's a 4.5 percentage point national victory. That's going to be a difficult margin to keep. And I'm only saying that based on, and again, I said we weren't gonna look at the polls, but if we are looking at polls in terms of the national polling markets, we see that this election is much closer than a 4.5 percentage point margin. With that said, any chance Kamala Harris has at claiming the state of North Carolina and flipping it into her column relies on a very favorable national environment. A national environment close to Biden's, if not beyond that. Moving on to Pennsylvania, polls close at 8. One of the more important states in this election cycle, but we'll get into that in other videos. In Pennsylvania, or I should say the state of Pennsylvania has voted to the right of the nation in both 2016 and 2020 by nearly identical margins of 3 percentage points, just about 3 percentage points. It's also shifted to the right from 2016 to 2020 by about a half a percentage point. If you contextualize that and go further, back to 2000, the 2000 election, it has actually shifted highly significantly towards the right. But again, we're just looking at 2016 margins to 2020 margins, and it shifted about half a percentage point to the right. That being said, 3 percentage points is right around where, if you were to ask me today where I project the popular vote to go, I would tell you we're looking at close to Harris victory of plus 2.5 to plus 3.5. That's kind of the sweet spot where I'm leaning towards right now, just based on looking at polls, looking at trends, and just gut feel. That's kind of where I'm feeling it. I can see it going lower and higher, obviously. I can see it going to Hillary Clinton margins. I can see it going to Joe Biden margins. There's arguments to be made for both. But I'm almost cutting the difference and saying it's looking closer to about a 2.5 to 3.5 margin of victory. So just saying that, you can see how Pennsylvania is just right on that teeter-totter. It is right down the middle. It's going to shift. If it continues to shift in its current path, and it continues to vote to the right of the nation by a similar margin, we're probably looking at Pennsylvania voting about 3 points to 3.5 points to the right of the nation. So a national margin of about 3, well, that puts Pennsylvania straight, directly, square in the toss-up column with a slight edge towards Donald Trump and the Democrats, towards Donald Trump and the Republicans in that national environment. So if you're Kamala Harris, you'd like to make this a national environment of plus 3.5 to 4. I mean, obviously, if you're Kamala Harris, you'd like this popular voting margin to be plus 4 and beyond. You want it close to Biden numbers. Where if you're Donald Trump, you'd obviously prefer a national environment closer to the 2.1 percentage points that Hillary Clinton won by in 2016, or even less. Those are obvious statements. So, just to put a bow on Pennsylvania, I'd say a plus 3.5 margin for Kamala Harris could edge her Pennsylvania, whereas anything lower than that, and we're looking at Pennsylvania, just according to trends, shifting towards Donald Trump ever so slightly, but a teeter-totter nonetheless, one way or the other. Taking a look at Michigan, polls close at 8. This state is a lot friendlier towards Democrats, though again, does vote to the right of the nation, or has voted to the right of the nation in the last two elections. In 2016 by about 2.5 percentage points, and then a little less so in 2020 by about 1.5 percentage points. And you can see that that means Michigan has shifted between 2016 and 2020 about half a percentage point, 0.7 percentage points to the left. This is one of those states where Donald Trump is going to need, if he wants to flip this back into his column. As you can see, he only won Michigan by about 0.3 percentage points in a friendlier 2016 national environment. With the shift Michigan has undergone to the left between 2016 and 2020, he's going to need a better environment probably than 2016. So the 2016 environment was plus 2.1. He's going to want that inside of 2. He's going to want a national environment closer to 1 percentage point, 1.5 percentage point in favor of Kamala Harris in order to get this back in his column. I don't think a national environment of 2016 will do it for Donald Trump here, because it just went into his favor by again less than half a percentage point, and that was with a 2.1 national environment. Michigan has shifted towards the left. I imagine it'll keep shifting to the left, even if it doesn't shift toward the left any more than the 1.7 points that it voted for, that it voted in favor of Republicans back in 2020. Even a 1.7% Republican lean won't be enough. In a 2016 environment, you'd need a much more favorable, or a slightly more favorable environment for Donald Trump to take this state. Taking a look at Wisconsin, polls close at 9. This is a state that, opposite Michigan, has trended more towards Republicans from 2016 to 2020. And it's voted to the right of the nation by nearly 3 points in 2016 and nearly 4 points in 2020. So, in this kind of an environment, just based on trends, Kamala Harris would like to see a closer to 2020 margin, would need to see, in my estimation, a closer or near identical margin to that 2020 in order to put Wisconsin in her favor. I'd say plus 4.5 to match what Biden did might not be enough for Kamala Harris, as it only voted for Biden by just under a percentage point. And with its shift towards the right, just by looking at trends, I think you need to see a closer to 4.8 to 5 point margin of victory for Kamala Harris. Anything lower than that, and just according to trends, Trump should be in shape to claim Wisconsin if these trends hold. Moving on to Arizona, polls closing at 9. They have undergone a shift to the left, and they've undergone a shift continually to the left. Now, Donald Trump's gains among the Hispanic community have made this a little bit more interesting. As you can see, they voted nearly 6 points to the right of the national average back in 2016. Now that average has cooled off back to 4.2 in 2020, and Biden just edged out a 0.3 percentage point victory in 2020, and that was in a very favorable popular vote environment, national environment. But we also see that Arizona, between 2016 and 2020, has shifted about 1.4 points to the left. That being said, I think in 2024, we're looking at a closer to R plus 3.5 or so margin to the right of the popular vote. So anything beyond a 3.5 percentage point victory for Kamala Harris should put her in shape to hold the state of Arizona. Anything below that threshold, though, would be very difficult to see that state not going to Donald Trump. And that, again, is if these trends maintain. There's an argument to be made that that we see closer to 2016 margins in terms of shifting, just based on polling data and all that. But again, because we're not going based off of polling data in this video and just according to trends, that's where I stand. To wrap things up here in the state of Nevada, where polls close at 10, we have our first state, and our only state among the 7, that actually voted to the left of the nation at one point, and it voted to the left of the nation in 2016 by about 0.3 percentage points. It voted pretty much in line with the nation there, but just so slightly to the left of it. Now in 2020, we saw a fairly significant shift to the right of the nation. It voted about 2 percentage points to the right. In a Biden plus 4.5, it still voted for Biden by plus 2.4 percentage points. That shows Nevada shifting about 2.5 percentage points to the right between 2016 and 2020. If that trend persists, we're probably looking at a Republican lean of about 3. So for Kamala Harris to keep Nevada in its column, to keep Nevada in her column, to keep Nevada in the Democrats' column, she'll be looking for a popular vote victory of close to plus 3.5. You can edge it with plus 3, but she'll definitely be looking for closer to Biden numbers in order to keep that in her column. Now, before I close this video, I just wanted to have some fun with the Electoral College map based on the national environments. We've gone through this basically as we've touched on each state, but I just wanted to take a look at some whole numbers and see where the Electoral College would line up if a national polling environment goes, let's say, for example, and we'll advance this slide, a national environment of Harris plus 4. Now, I know these are very round, square numbers. I didn't want to get too fancy with decimals here. Let's just take a look based on some whole numbers here. So in a national environment of Harris plus 4, clearly her most favorable. Now, again, this could go plus 5. You could have a much more favorable environment, but then other things would begin to shift. So let's just go at some, fairly realistic, not saying that there's unrealistic things when it comes to elections, right? Anything could happen. But in terms of just how it looks right now, I'd say the top that Harris can go is about Biden numbers. So Harris plus 5, plus 4.5, plus 4 seems like a pretty good threshold to put as her ceiling, while her floor is probably close to about plus 1, as I can't see Donald Trump winning or coming close to an a popular vote draw. So that's kind of where I put the peak in the valley here. So Harris plus 4, in that environment, we pretty much see what's close to her landslide scenario, and that is she holds the blue wall up here in Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, all of which rely on a pretty friendly environment towards Trump to take it, with the exceptions with Wisconsin and Pennsylvania being close here. Even in a Harris plus 4 environment, we can see that Wisconsin and Pennsylvania would probably be close. North Carolina, though I put in the red column, could very well shift towards Harris in this environment based on polls and other factors. But just solely based on trends, North Carolina is going to be very difficult for Harris to move into her column just based off of trends. So this will keep in the red column, in the Trump column. Georgia, the big one here that goes towards Kamala Harris, she holds on to Nevada and holds on to Arizona. So she basically holds every state Biden won in 2020. This is a map that's fairly identical to the Biden 2020 model. Moving on to a national environment of Harris +3, now we get a lot more close to where I feel that this election will shape. Now, I know here again, this is not a projection. This is not. I'm trying not to show anything beyond what the national trends are telling. But even to say that Trump is going to win this model when Harris wins with a national environment of +3, it's not entirely accurate because, again, states like Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, even in this model, would be very, very tight, and especially Pennsylvania. I could see just teetering in this environment, Harris +3, teetering towards the Democrats or the Republicans, just based on the fact that it shifted about half a percentage point to the right from 2016 to 2020. I'm giving a slight tilt in terms of national trends towards the Republicans, and that puts both Pennsylvania and Wisconsin ever so slightly in the Republican column. Now, make this Harris +3.5. I'd probably reevaluate that. I'd probably move those states into the blue column. So, that's where I kind of teeter. But if we have a Harris +3, this is kind of just where my gut feel is in terms of national trends. I can see North Carolina staying Republican. I can see Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Arizona flipping towards Donald Trump. I still don't think it's a friendly enough environment just based on trends to flip Georgia, and it's certainly not friendly enough to flip Michigan or Nevada. Let's move to Harris +2. Now we're getting into where Trump is going to find his most favorable. Where Harris would probably like to keep it upwards of +3. Anything lower than Harris +3 is going to favor Donald Trump, and here I'm a lot more certain of that. This isn't just talking in terms of trends. I can't imagine. I can't really imagine a scenario where Harris comes close to the Clinton numbers of 2016, which was 2.1 +2, and her being able to edge a victory out over Donald Trump with those numbers. I just can't see it. I certainly can't see it in terms of national trends. In a Harris +2 national environment, I'm fairly confident states like Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Arizona move towards Donald Trump. Nevada would be a closer number, but again, that's a state that I think, based solely on trends, would teeter towards Donald Trump. Again, once we put polls and other data into this model, we might see different results by a state or two. But again, a +2% national environment for Harris is a very favorable national environment towards the Republicans. And just to further put that to bed, if it comes close to a Harris +1, this is when we start getting into a Trump landslide scenario where he would then, I feel like, sweep the upper Rust Belt, win the states that he won in 2016, and add Nevada to his column, giving him a very, very comfortable Electoral College victory. Now, again, that's really Kamala Harris's floor, whereas I believe +4.5, +4 to be her ceiling. And I base those, those are kind of based off of feel and polls and other data, not just national trends. But if you do go by just national trends in terms of the popular vote, if the nation continues to trend to the left, obviously anything farther than +4, +4.5, anything that beats the Biden 2020 model would certainly benefit Kamala Harris and result in a fairly significant Electoral College victory, if not a qualified landslide. Whereas anything below Harris +2, which was the Clinton model in 2016, would certainly favor Trump, and the closer you get towards even popular voting margins, the closer you get to a Trump landslide model. That'll do it for this video. We talked about national trends, and we talked about the 7 battlegrounds. Eventually, I'm going to come out with a video that does show my state-by-state predictions and how I feel the 7 battlegrounds are going to look. I also want to show some victory scenarios for Harris and Trump respectively, and what their most likely paths, what the most likely paths are to victory for both of them. Obviously, you can make a model of over 1,000 different combinations, but we're talking in terms of likelihood. I want to make videos that show that, but I do want to wait until we have the dust settled from the debate and we can start looking back at some polling data as well. Because again, while this video went solely based off of the national margins, there's more than the national margins. There's more than the national trends that play into the Electoral College, that play into how we have to look at these voting numbers, polls, demographics, just voter shifts. That combined with the national trends is how we're going to get our final predictions before November 5th. So definitely gonna do that. So definitely stay on the lookout for that. Please subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Throw us a like, and again, have a good week, have a good month, and enjoy this election cycle. It is getting more and more interesting by the day as we get closer to November 5th.